So 2008, the global economy collapses. So what happens, okay, and I believe this is what happened. I don't think this is conspiracy theory. The central banks basically encouraged the Chinese central bank to start printing money, right? And this is important because when you start printing money and you invest in real estate, you need resources. You need to buy resources from Australia, from Brazil. And this is what saves the global economy. And this all looks very impressive, guys. Like, I know when you go outside and you see all these big buildings and fancy railways, it's all very impressive. But remember, okay, this is really important. Behind the veneer of this prosperity are three things. Massive debt, right? Because this money is being printed. So someone has to pay this off. You guys, not the current people, but you guys or your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren, okay? But someone has to pay off this debt. That's number one. Number two is this has created massive inequality in China, right? So the rich are filthy rich and the poor aren't that much better off. And the third problem that's really important is it's created a lot of political corruption, all right? So behind all this veneer are corruption, inequality, and debt. And this is what, okay? So a really important lesson for you guys to understand the Chinese relationship with America is this. There's this very, very famous quote by Charles Baudelaire who said, "The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist." Okay? Well, I'm going to paraphrase him, okay? And this is what I think is the relationship between America and China. The greatest trick America played was convincing China it could be rich. All right? This is no different from 1985, the Plaza Accords, when America basically encouraged the Japanese to increase the value of their yen, which led to economic collapse. Well, but when Americans encouraged the Chinese to print money in about 2008 and about 2015, it basically created conditions for China's economic collapse, okay? All right. This is what led to the rise of this man, our dear fearless leader, okay? I believe his intentions are good. I think he wants to save China from this global financial capitalist system. He needs to maintain China's independence and sovereignty. And he's fighting very hard to save the Chinese nation, okay? That's what I believe. And so you can make the argument that what's happening today in China is no different from the Opium Wars. Remember, Britain created an opium epidemic in China in order to enslave the Chinese economy to the global financial system, right? That was the Opium Wars. Well, the same is happening today where the Americans have basically created a Chinese dependency on US dollars, right? What is the Chinese dream? The Chinese dream is work hard, get into a good school, get rich, move your money and your children to the United States. That's the Chinese dream, all right? And if that's a dream, then eventually the civilization won't last very long. Am I wrong? Is that not the Chinese dream? All right. So now you have the COVID crisis where China's locked down for 3 years. Now, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, okay? But you can make the argument that some of this was intentional in order to implode the Chinese economy. Why? Because the Chinese economy had become a system of transferring wealth from China to the United States. So by imploding the economy, you're stopping this drainage, okay? All right. This also led to the rise of this man, Vladimir Putin, who is very much like Joseph Stalin. He understands the grand picture. He understands strategy, grand strategy. He understands that now it's time to strike. Why? Because America has created this crazy, fantastical system, right, where there's a hierarchy of prices. In the American system, the Pax Americana, many resources are the least valuable, okay? The basis are the resources, right? Which is what Russia has a lot of. Up next in this pyramid is manufacturing, which is what China does. Then up next is knowledge economy, so professionals. And that's what Europe and America does really well, okay? And at the very top of this pyramid are the financiers, finance. And that's what Wall Street dominates, okay? So this is the pyramid of the world that we live in. What Putin said is this. What Putin said is, you know what? If I can control the world's resources, the oil, the food, then I can invert this pyramid so that resource at the top. And that's why Russia invaded Ukraine. Because if Russia were able to dominate Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine together would control one-third of the world's carbohydrates. Without Russian food, Africa and the Middle East would both starve to death. Okay? And so that is the rationale for Putin's invasion of Ukraine. He's a genius. He understands there's fundamental weakness in the American system. Okay? If you're able to control the resources, you are able to strangle this financial system. Okay? So by invading Ukraine, Putin shows that America is a paper tiger. Faith in the USD rests on the aura of the American military's inevitability and invincibility. This now forces the Americans to invade Iran. Okay, does that make sense to you guys? The logic here is very simple. Why does Saudi Arabia buy US dollars, even though they know it's not worth anything? Why does Japan buy US dollars? What is Germany? The answer is they're afraid that if they don't buy US dollars, America will come invade them. Okay? They have no choice in the matter. But now that Putin has showed that, actually, you know what? The American military is not as strong as you think it is. The American military now has no choice but to prove it is as strong as people believe. It needs to restore faith in the military in order to restore faith in the US dollar. Okay, does that make sense? That's why the American military has no choice in the matter but to invade Iran. Okay? Why? Because if they're able to invade Iran, they're able to control the entire flow of Middle East oil. Also, they're able to control the axis of trade throughout the world, okay? Iran is really the center of the world in terms of global trade. So these two factors mean that America needs to eventually invade Iran. All right. Once it invades Iran, it creates a huge problem for China and Japan and South Korea. Why? Because guess what? These three nations get most of this oil from the Middle East, right? Japan imports roughly 89% of its oil from the Middle East. And guess what, guys? Japan is the largest buyer of US dollars. So if Japan ever says, you know what, screw this, we're not buying US dollars, the American economy goes bankrupt. So when you invade Iran, you control the oil supply, you control the entire Japanese economy. You can charge whatever price you want for oil. All right, this explains the Israel-Palestine conflict. Because America just can't go invade Iran for no reason. It needs a pretext. The perfect pretext is Israel comes in conflict with Iran. Iran attacks Israel. The United States must now defend Israel because Israel is its ally. Right? Does that make sense? So America needs a scapegoat. That scapegoat is Israel. That explains why there's so much conflict right now in the Middle East. Look at this map, okay? This is Iran. It's surrounded by American bases. You have 14,000 troops in Afghanistan. You've got like thousands more over here, okay? Iran is surrounded. It seems to me that America's been preparing to invade Iran for the past 20 years. It's just looking for the perfect opportunity. All right. The problem, though, is that Iran is not an adversary that America can defeat. The reason why is the geography of Iran. Look at this. In 2003, America went to Iraq and destroyed Iraq. Why? Iraq's a desert. It's flat plains. America has bombs. It has fighter planes, right? It's pretty easy to destroy a desert. But Iran is all mountains. These fighter planes do no good against mountains. You can't bomb a mountain into submission. Okay? So if America were to invade Iran, there's very little chance that America would win this war. In fact, it may be the end of the American empire. And Putin has a plan, okay? Putin is a genius. He knows exactly what will happen. So Putin is preparing for this possible invasion of Iran. So this is a really important picture. Putin signed an agreement with Kim Jong-un. The agreement is something called a Mutual Defense Pact, which means that if North Korea is ever attacked, Putin would come to his aid. All right? Now, why would Putin do this? This is really strange. The answer is this. The answer is, if America attacks Iran, he needs to throw America off balance by creating a conflict somewhere else. The best place to create a conflict would be Southeast Asia, right? Now, you would think, wait a minute here. Putin and China are best friends. If America invades Iran, then China may invade Taiwan. But I already told you this. China is dependent on the American economy. So I do not believe this will happen. Okay? And Putin is fairly certain this won't happen either. That's why he's now best friends with Kim Jong-un. Because Kim Jong-un, if he were to menace South Korea, that would throw the American military off balance. Because now there is war on 3 fronts: Ukraine, South North Korea, and Iran. Okay? That's the grand strategy of Putin. This is his trump card. Okay, does that make sense? All right. Now, what I'm saying here is this. I'm saying, like, I know there's a lot of conflict now between China and America. There's this trade war going on. But I think this will pass. I think there'll be a rapprochement between China and America because both economies are dependent on each other. Right? So I think this friendship between Putin and China won't last very long. There's also really a lot of geopolitical reasons why this friendship won't last very long, right? Because China and Russia have a lot of geopolitical conflicts, right? They share a border. They're trying to vie for influence in Central Asia. There's lots of reasons why, in the long term, China and Russia will eventually have to break apart, which means that Putin now sees his best friend could be Germany. Okay, this I think are going to be the 2 big geopolitical surprises in the next 5 years. First of all, America and China will become best friends, or not best friends, but they'll have a rapprochement. And then Germany and Russia will have a rapprochement. Okay? All right. So, Donald Trump, President of the United States, he wants a 3rd term, okay? He's creating, everything he's doing right now is because he wants to be king of the United States. He wants a 3rd term, okay, for a variety of reasons, okay? I won't go into many reasons, okay, but he's that narcissistic. He has to solve a problem. This problem is the national debt, right? It's now $37 trillion. You can't pay this off. You can never pay this off. But the theory is this. The theory is like, as long as you are the greatest military in the world, as long as you can go invade everyone, you don't have to pay this off. You can constantly increase this debt. Okay? That's the theory. This explains the US-China trade war. Everything that we're seeing today is because Donald Trump needs to come to an agreement with China for a variety of reasons. Okay, the first reason is Trump wants to invade Iran, and so he needs to be on good terms with China. Okay? Another reason is he needs people to buy US dollars. Right? And right now there's a lot of financial repression in China, meaning that you can't convert Chinese currency into US currency. American investors aren't allowed to come to China and buy up the Chinese financial system. Trump wants China to open up. Trump needs to create more interdependency between China and the United States. Okay? And that's why, for Trump, Chinese citizens and students in America is the ultimate leverage point in negotiations. Ask yourself why this is happening. Why is it that your visas are being threatened? You want to go to the United States and spend a lot of money to get an American education. But Trump is saying, no, 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 we get to go to your visa. Why is this happening? It's all part of negotiation, okay? There's no way that America will shut out Chinese students because America needs that money, okay? Well, without Chinese spending money in America, without Chinese wanting to purchase US dollars, the American economy will collapse. So there's no way that America will close its door to Chinese students. But it needs China to open up its economy furthermore to create more interdependency to save the US dollar, okay?